Jordan Peterson is a fascinating character in many respects. When it comes to psychology stuff, I watched a lecture of his, 2017 lecture, where he talks about Freud and Freud's theories. And look, it was brilliant. I don't care what you think about Jordan Peterson personally or politically, on his psychology stuff and even his self-help stuff. There's a reason why he's gained a colossal following. And if you're on the left, it does you no favors to downplay that or to not try to understand where the interest and the intrigue comes from among a gigantic group of people. So in some ways, I think the guy's brilliant. In other ways, I have profound disagreements with him, namely in the realm of politics, namely in the realm of religion as well. So Jordan Peterson went on Dr. Oz's show. By the way, Dr. Oz is now running for Senate in, I think, Pennsylvania. He's up against John Fetterman. Oh boy, that's going to be an interesting race to see. Dr. Oz definitely has the ability to potentially win, but Fetterman's a great candidate too, and obviously I agree with Fetterman on policy way more, so I'd be supporter of Fetterman. But anyway, I digress. Jordan Peterson went on Dr. Oz's show, and he explained his politics here. I want to take a look, and then I'll respond.
If 0 is ultra liberal and 100 is the ultra conservative, alt-right, where are you on that spectrum? You think of yourself as more conservative, more liberal? I know that in your life you've changed.
Well, I'm a traditionalist in many senses, but I'm a very creative person, so it's very difficult temperamentally for me to place myself on the political spectrum. It's not like I don't think that the dispossessed deserve a political voice. That's why I was interested in socialist politics when I was a kid, and I understand perfectly well that hierarchies dispossess and that something has to be done about that. But I also think that we mess with fundamental social structures at our great peril. I think we've destabilized marriage very badly, and that's not been good for people, especially not good for children. But I don't think it's been good for adult men and women either. Mm-hmm. And I certainly, as a social scientist, one of the things you learn if you're a social scientist and you're well educated and informed is that if you take a complex system, let's imagine you have a complex system and you have a hypothesis about how to intervene so that it will improve. Okay, so what will you learn? You'll learn once you implement the intervention that you didn't understand the system and that your stupid intervention did a bunch of things you didn't expect it to, many of which ran counter to your original intent. And you will inevitably learn that. So I learned that. I had a whole series of very wise mentors who insisted to everyone they talked to who was interested in public policy, for example, that when they put in place a well-meaning public policy initiative, that they put aside a substantial proportion of the budget to evaluate the outcome of the initiative, because the probability that the initiative would produce the results desired was virtually zero. And I believe that that's technically true. And so that tilts me in the conservative direction, because I think, well, that's sort of working, that system. And I'm also not a utopian. So I don't expect systems to work perfectly. If they're not degenerating into absolute tyranny, I tend to think they're doing quite well. Because if you look worldwide and you look at the entire course of human history, degeneration into abject tyranny is the norm. And so if you see systems like our systems, say in the democratic Western world, that are struggling by not too badly, it's like you should be in awe of those structures because they're so difficult to produce and so unlikely. And then I think, well, you take a system that's working not too badly, think, well, I'm going to radically improve it. It's like, no, you're not. You're not going to radically improve it. You might be able to improve it incrementally if you devoted a large part of your entire life to it and you were very humble about your methods and your ambition. But if you think that some careless tweak of this complex system as a consequence of the ideological presuppositions you learned in 3 weeks in your social justice class at university, and that's going to produce a radical improvement, it's like you can't even begin to fathom the depths of your ignorance.
So here's my issue with that. To sum up his argument towards the end there is, hey, there are well-meaning lefties who are kind of utopian and pie in the sky in many respects, and they intervene in systems to try to improve them. They have these ideas that seem practical, but actually those ideas end up being very counterproductive, and they mess up a system that was otherwise working better before. That's my, steel manning of his position that he's espousing there at the end. And my response to that is, listen, I came into left-wing politics with the exact opposite mindset. Namely, I'm not here to do pie-in-the-sky utopian analysis and tweaks to the system. I'm here to try to empirically improve the system based on data and information and knowledge that we already have. So, for example, the economic policies of the social democracies. I mean, how many times do I have to bring it up? Whether it's the universal healthcare systems that they have, they kick our butt in every measurable way. When you compare their system to the U.S. system, so there was the World Health Organization study, which had us ranked number 37, and of course, littered in the top 10 was virtually all universal healthcare systems throughout the developed world. Then there's the Commonwealth Fund study, which ranked 11 industrialized countries' healthcare systems. We were 11th out of 11, and of course, the single-payer systems and the universal healthcare systems were at the top there. So it is an empirical argument to say, hey, if we give everybody healthcare free at the point of service, funded with our tax dollars, then you're doing the morally correct thing, the ethically correct thing, but also the economically correct thing and the fiscally conservative thing, because it fundamentally ends up saving money because we have a price gouging middleman in this country called the health insurance companies, which rip everybody off and they play no necessary role. So that's a leftist policy that is based solely on empiricism and objective analysis and saying, hey, they do it better than us based on all the data, so why don't we do that? Same thing with like free college systems, for example. Same thing with, in some of the Scandinavian countries, they have near universal unionization. So in those countries, workers make much better wages and have much better lives and report much more happiness as a result of that. So my, me being attracted to leftism is based on the opposite of what he's claiming here. He's claiming it's just almost these naive do-gooders who really do mean well, but they end up messing stuff up because their ideas, once you implement them, make things worse. No, I'm talking about look at the actual data and look at the world systems, and when you do that, you find that a lot of these social democratic ideas are kind of no-brainers, and they really destroy our more rugged capitalist approach. And I don't really think that this point that I'm making is even a debatable one, to be honest. I think it's ironclad. And so that's my main disagreement with him. He says something in there that he says, quote, that's sort of working, that system. And so that's why you don't mess with it. And again, I would just disagree as a point of fact on that, because you guys know I run through these facts all the time, but half of Americans make $30,000 a year or less, and this was pre-pandemic. About 30 million Americans don't have health insurance. Medical bills are the top cause of bankruptcy in this country. 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Some astonishing number of Americans can't even, afford a $1,000 emergency. 6 people in the Walton family have more wealth than nearly 50%, half the country combined. They're about to start student loan repayments. 89% of Americans who have student loan debt say, I'm not financially stable enough to start paying student loans back again. So there's a real baseline systemic failure that we're dealing with here. And to say, well, that system is, quote, that's sort of working, that system, I just don't agree with that. Yeah, is it working in comparison to, some developing country that has a GDP that's 20% of ours and a population that's way less and they don't have plumbing? Sure, but that level of analysis and that comparison, I don't think is the right standard to evaluate it by. And just to run through some of the other things he says there. So when he's asked, are you basically on the left or the right? He says, well, I'm a traditionalist, but I'm also a creative person. Now, in his conception of things, the creative stuff usually falls on the left of the spectrum. The traditionalist stuff falls on the right of the spectrum. So he says, hey, it's hard for me to put myself on the spectrum. But he does go on to admit, I probably lean conservative. The traditionalist thing, I'd be interested in digging into what he means there. Because I think what he's trying to say is, I believe in marriage. I believe in religion as a guiding force in a sense, and that is more of a traditional outlook on stuff. He does admit that hierarchies dispossess and something has to be done about that. Again, that gets back to the ideas, what I think are empirically good ideas of left economic approaches. But listen, I have I have some fun news for everybody. So we're currently in talks. We're trying to get Jordan Peterson on Crystal Kyle and Friends because there's so much I want to talk to him about. In many ways, he's become a cultural phenomenon. And like I said, I actually thoroughly respect and like his psychology stuff. And even his self-help stuff, I think, helps a lot of people who need guidance, and he provides the guidance. And I don't think there's any harm in telling people, hey, clean your room and stand up straight and do the right thing and take responsibility. So I got a lot to talk to him about on the psychology front. He's done brilliant breakdowns of Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud and others. And so there'll be plenty of areas of agreement, but then also we'll get into our disagreements. We'll get into our disagreement on economics. We'll get into our disagreement on politics. We'll get into our disagreements on religion. And so it should be a really substantive and fun and interesting conversation. I hope all you guys will tune in. So yeah, we're currently in talks to try to get him on Crystal Kyle and Friends. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.